Today, we are talking about how using AI to write our government grant proposals actually tanked our win rate. It completely backfired.
Yeah, our business suffered, so yours doesn't have to. Today, we're going to break down an Air Force SBIR and how to and how not to incorporate AI help into your proposal writing process so you can get the benefits of using AI while protecting your win rate.
If you're not bidding on an Air Force SIBR, some of the sections of this will be irrelevant because a lot of them, the sections are actually the same. But if you want us to break this down similarly for another agency, let us know which agency in the comments and we'll pick it for the next one. For each volume in the SIBR proposal, we are going to break down what AI tools we use and we're going to let you steal our prompts. So we'll go from volume 1 to volume 5, starting with, of course, volume 1.
And before we get into the nitty gritty of volume 1, a big part of a viable AI strategy for these proposals is how you use the AI, not just how you craft or engineer the prompt. So this is potentially the most valuable part of this entire session. So pay attention. Whatever AI platform you pick one that allows you to upload reference documents that you can easily query. So technically, you can set up projects in most of the big providers to do this. So ChatGPT, Claude, NotebookLM, you can even use Cortex, which is more of a storytelling, like writing based AI. But whatever you do, don't just fire a prompt off into the void and expect a good response, especially for more technical content. We have been using NotebookLM, and while it doesn't deliver the most compelling narrative, it is very good at analyzing the content that you give it. With that in mind, use your AI of choice, but make sure you pick one where you can give it specific reference documents.
For volume 1, what are ways that we do use AI and what are ways that we do not recommend that you use AI?
A SIBR volume 1 is the cover sheet, and it is the very first thing that your reviewer sees when they open up your proposal. So it's actually easier to write your volume 1 when you have finished your volume 2 or the technical volume, which is the bulk of your proposal. So how we have been using it is we will create a data shelf or a set of reference documents that include our finished volume 2. And this is, your technical summary, your objectives, your work plan, all that good stuff, and the original solicitation topic. Once you have those two documents, you can start working on the prompt. And I usually just tell it to create a technical abstract. I give it the character count, which for most DoD agencies is 3,000 characters in DCIP. And then I add not to include any proprietary information and personal information, because if you win, these abstracts are public. And then for the benefits and commercial applications, I craft the prompt to say, list out the benefits to the military customer and the commercial applications kind of as bullet points and include a 1 to 2 sentence description on each one. This prompt, you may have to add additional sources to your reference documents if the commercial applications aren't heavily covered in your proposal. And this is pretty common if you're bidding on a topic that has export restrictions or is a closed topic and isn't expected to really be that dual use. So just keep that in mind. And then once it gives you the outputs, most AIs are terrible at actually sticking to a character count. So odds are it's going to give you something that you have to cut down anyway. Once you get the output, we edit for clarity, we delete repetition. And if it gives you any numbers, any statistics, we check those to make sure that they're accurate, because even though it's referencing a dedicated set of documents, it sometimes will still hallucinate, and you don't want fabricated data in the very first thing that your reviewer sees.
Yeah, I think the
And
fact that this is the first thing that your reviewer sees is an important piece to emphasize here. If there's any section that you're really going to make sure that every word counts, it's this one, because the motivation of the evaluator to continue reading your proposal is set by the volume.
Exactly. Do not phone it in, AI or otherwise, on the volume 1, because you want to prime your reviewer to be so interested and fascinated with what you have to say that they can't wait to read the full proposal. You do not want to turn them off immediately with vague AI slop in this cover sheet.
Onto the volume two. And there are different components where you can rely on AI more heavily and more experience. And then there are other components where you can rely on it less or maybe in a very different way. So we're going to actually go through each section. For an AFWORK SIBR, the opening section of the volume two is a technical summary, which Lorelei, you generally own on our proposals and grants that we submit for AFWORK. So talk about how you do and don't use AI on a technical summary in a volume two.
Before you start prompting for volume two, which is the most significant part of your proposal, you want to build out a set of reference documents or a data shelf for the AI to reference. So the documents that I typically include are the solicitation topic, any papers cited in the topic, either throughout the document or in the citation part at the end, any government web pages related to the topic or government issued documents related to the topic, our company website, and any related proposals or project documents we have done that have any relevance to what we're bidding on this time around. And if you're using Notebook LM because it is Google, you can also reference YouTube videos and it will pull the transcript and reference them as well. You can still reference videos if you're using a different AI platform, but sometimes you will have to go and pull the transcript manually and upload it. You can't just do it out of the box, which is fine. There's just, an extra step. So once you have that data shelf or those set of reference documents built out, then you can start figuring out what to prompt to fill out all of the sections in this technical summary. Looking at the component instructions for this solicitation, the first section it wants you to talk about is identification and significance of the problem or opportunity. So under that section, the BAA gives you some details on what they want you to talk about. And for this one, it says define the specific technical problem or opportunity addressed and its importance. So I will take that and then turn it into a prompt for the AI, in our case, Notebook LM. And this sentence is a little bit vague and it's a little bit unclear what its importance means. So I would probably reword this to say, define the specific technical problem identified in this topic and address its importance to the Air Force. Or if it says specifically who within the Air Force, I would include that in the prompt. And then if it was for a phase one, I would say, write this out in 2 paragraphs. If it's a direct to phase two, I'd probably ask for 4. AI's still not great on actually adhering to those parameters, but you can always try. And then once we get that back, go through and do that same kind of clarity and narrative edit to make it sound like something that a human would actually say.
The one I'll add in this section is when you're trying to elaborate on the significance of the opportunity or the significance of the problem. I really love to use published agency level strategy documentation. Really good for finding quotes that are relevant, things like that. However, those documents can be very, very dense. What you can do is provide those documents into the reference shelf, and then you can prompt specifically for them. Right? As you can say, I'm looking for some compelling quotes that talks about the significance of the problem. Here's some agency level documentation. That has been accurate for me for at least making it a little bit less overwhelming if you're trying to get through a 50-page Air Force strategy document on modernization.
That's a great call out to include the strategy documents in the data shelf from the get-go. You don't have to have it reference it for every single prompt, but it is a great one to include in there. And for these more like narrative structure, these kind of introductions are ones where you're really trying to convey the value of what you're offering. I sometimes will take what Notebook LM spits out and then put it into an AI that's a little bit more geared towards making things sound better, like Claude, or like we use Sintra, which has a dedicated copyright AI agent in there.
What are ways that we don't use AI on this particular section of the volume two?
In this section, and pretty much any section, I would not use AI here to find research articles to back up your technical summary because it will hallucinate them and you spend more time checking that the citation is real and accurate than what it would take to just go do it yourself.
Yeah, it is literally faster to just go do it yourself, which is a lesson I think you have to learn the hard way.
The next big part of the technical volume, and for a lot of volume twos, is the work plan. Sophia, do you want to walk us through how you use AI in this section and how you don't?
Yeah, there's two kind of components to the work plan. So one is the technical objectives and one is the task outline. For the technical objectives, one of the ways that I would use AI is I would summarize the scope of what we're proposing into short objective statements that are more outlined. So think like a title and bullet points than a narrative. And I would feed it to Notebook LM or one of the Sintra agents that we use and say, compare these proposed scope of work objectives to the solicitation. Do they match? Is it clear that the scope we're proposing is responding to the solicitation? Sometimes it will say, oh, the solicitation emphasizes safety and you don't have it listed, or cybersecurity, you don't have it listed. If an AI agent can catch it, then an evaluator will too. Once I have that, then I will say, take my outline and frame it into a narrative. I do use the narratives I'm providing, but I recommend copying and pasting them, putting them on a separate screen, and rewriting them yourself. And here's why. I find a lot of the tools that we have used today either use language that is super, super dry, or they use a lot of this will transform, this will revolutionize. And in the technical objectives and in the work plan, you are not selling the dream. You did that higher up in the proposal. You are selling your competence to deliver on the scope of work that you are proposing. Outline it yourself, feed the outline in the solicitation back, and request a comparison to see if there's anything obvious that you're missing, and then have it help you frame a narrative, but rewrite the narrative yourself into a tone that matches your proposal. Generally speaking, here, this is one where first outline is done human, first draft is AI assisted, but final draft is pretty human would be my cycle. Same thing for the work plan. Outline the task schedule, but don't use complete sentences just to make it fast for yourself. And then ask, does this work plan clearly support these technical objectives? And does it clearly respond to the solicitation? You can even provide the evaluation criteria and just make sure that you're not missing anything. I've been happy with a work plan that was fully AI generated. If anyone has a prompt that they use that they love, I would love to hear it. But every variation that I've tried, the work plan is either incredibly vague or it's not really aligned to the technical objectives. And you really want to make sure that it is incredibly clear that the work plan will deliver the scope of work that has been proposed. It should be very consistent. But just in case I am going to say this, the work plan is where you're going to be talking more. You need to be using something that is closed. Please don't draft this in open source GPT. That is a lot of information about your company that I don't think you or your founders or CEOs, if you're a grant writer working at a different startup, want to be publicly available in someone else's model. So just please, whatever you do in this section, don't use an open model.
I know with ChatGPT, you can say, don't let my data be used to continue training the model. Most people will turn that off, but that they still have your data. Even if it's not being used to train the model, as soon as you hit enter, they have it.
Yep.
I think that using an AI to basically grade you the same way that an evaluator would is one of the lesser known and underutilized advantages of AI. So you can do that with the work plan, but you can do that with the entire volume 2 as well. When you're done, you can take your volume 2 and you can take the evaluation criteria that is usually somewhere in the BAA. You can rip that out and give it to your AI of choice and ask it to grade your or evaluate your proposal based on the given criteria and kind of see how you're going to score. And if you're really lacking in something, if you do this with, less than a couple hours to spare, you can go back and revise those sections. I think that's, definitely one of the gate kept and not talked about uses of AI, because it has nothing really to do with content generation or writing, but it is something that AI is good.
Yes, because it's a comparison analysis. I did once when I did this have the AI catch a missed requirement where the work plan requirements usually don't change. And then there was one agency that we were submitting for, and the work plan had a small requirement to say, like, detail the personnel hours. And so it caught it. So I was able to go back and add the personal hours throughout the work plan to make sure that it was included, because originally it was not. The next big section of the volume 2 is the commercialization plan. My least favorite section, but you You always deliver really good ones that I just help clean up at the end. So, what are the ways we can and can't use AI on the commercialization plan?
I'm glad you think they're good because I also detest writing the commercialization plan because it's basically asking you to look into a crystal ball and then say with absolute certainty, this is what's going to happen before you've even started the project. So, yeah, I don't love that this section exists at all. How I use AI to write it is I will let it help me identify, if it isn't already clear, where the commercial market opportunities are. Sometimes it's really good and it will supply ones that I would not have thought of. And then sometimes it gives you ones where you're like, no, that's garbage. So it's helpful in the defining of what in the commercial sector the technology could be used for if it's not incredibly obvious. And if you're kind of new to government work and you're like, why would that even be a question? Like there's some things that come out that you're like, okay, how do we use this outside of the military? And actually like the one we're working on now for eye tracking, it gave me a commercial application that I didn't really think of, which was to put the eye tracking in vehicles to track the driver's eye movements and let them know if they're distracted or if they're starting to get loose focus or things like that. And it identified, the automotive industry as the target market. But that like helped me connect the dots of like, well, the automotive industry might be interested in that. It's actually the insurance companies that would be the main target commercial market for that. And that we see that already now. Different car insurance providers will give you a break on your premiums if you give them access to your phone. So they can tell if you're texting while driving and things like that. So that is actually probably the more likely commercial sector application or one of them. And I don't know that I would have thought of that quite that way if I hadn't gone through the AI prompting process. So the commercial sections are what is required of them is really varies. Let me try to pull up the one from
Yeah, the one in this cycle, I think you have to list who are the probable customers, who are the probable competitors, what differentiating factors do you have. I know we said earlier not to use agent defined research papers, but I have found the Sintra data analyst to be good at finding market data. You, of course, need to ask for the citations and then go look at the citations, but most of the time it has delivered recent, relevant market reports to me. So at least maybe because those are mostly numbers rather than research papers are more text driven. But in my experience, it's been a way, especially when it's asking for like relative market size and size of the opportunity, that directionally has worked for me on the sections that I've had to do this for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have used the market research that an AI has found in the commercialization section. It's just, I've had to go check each and every one to make sure it's real and relevant and, published
Up
within
to
the
date.
last couple of years. Yeah, up to date. So it's not that you can't use it at all, but like you can't trust it. You have to go fact check it. But it is very good at finding those market reports. And I think you're spot on. It's because it's numbers. And that's a lot easier for it to deal with than a research paper that is talking about human emotions or some other qualitative thing that it's just like, yeah, I don't know what that is. But yeah, commercialization, it's helpful in defining your commercial market and doing the kind of standard, you can prompt it to write a little blurb about what that market looks like and its outlook and things like that. But like Sophia said, just make sure you check the data sources that it's citing to make sure that they're the ones that you want to include.
But I've had a much higher hit rate, those sources being useful than the research where I feel like the hallucination research citations or news article citations is super high. But
Mhm.
market data, it's very low in my experience recently at least.
Moving on from the joys of the commercialization section, next we have key personnel. And this section appears in pretty much every proposal across agencies. So this one is pretty generally applicable. We kind of have a bit of a boilerplate at this stage that we use. So I don't know that we necessarily prompt AI for something every single time. But Sophia, do you want to talk about how we use it here?
Yeah, we've had a few projects that were collaborative where we brought on new team members. So I didn't have boilerplate content. And I feel like on the scale of like completely human generated hands to keyboard content to like completely AI generated, for me, this particular section is the highest of where I can use almost completely AI generated content. And I'll explain how. So the bios, the prompt that I have found that works really well is using something like Notebook LM and giving it the LinkedIn page, the resume of the individual, which most people should have, the CV of the individual, and anything public on the internet. So like this is someone from a university, for example, you could go grab their university profile, things like that. And then in the prompt, ask for a bio, but then ask the bio to highlight specific expertise or experience that is relevant to the solicitation. Now, with this, just feeding it the solicitation and saying relevant to the solicitation, I've gotten lower quality output. The highest quality output I have gotten is this person is a prompt that says, like, this person is going to be supporting the software engineering side of the AI model component of this. Here's their experience and background. I need a bio that includes their, basic background, but then highlights their experience training AI models. And then that gives me much better output than even referencing the solicitation. I say this because we did this with one partner where I took all that content, wrote their bios, and then sent it back to them. And they made almost no changes. They were like, these are great. Thank you so much. And I was like, cool. Thank AI. So I will say this is one of the sections where I've had much better with the output, but that is my prompt formula to get there.
We'll like link a document or something where you can get all of these prompts that we're talking about so you don't have to try to write them down. I hate that on social media where they're like, here's the best prompt that you're ever going to see in your life. And they flash it up on screen for like 3 seconds. And I'm like, thanks, bro. Next, we have related work. And again, this is in almost every single proposal. You are required to talk about your related work. Sometimes they will give you a breakdown of here's exactly what we want you to include, like the name of the project, your team and period of performance. If you have a little more leeway, and you can ask AI to write that for you. It's great with structure. Just make sure you build out your reference documents to include like your past proposals, past reports, product spec sheets, things like that for it to reference and build that out. You could probably get 90% of the way there. If it doesn't give you a set layout, which it's 50-50 whether they will or not, I will typically give it all of the company relevant documents, and then I'll also provide the topic document and get it to reference like those two sets of data, and then say put together a section on related work referencing the technology in the topic document so you don't just get like random work. It actually is related. Not a huge amount of prompt engineering here, pretty straightforward, but just making sure you have those documents already queued up and selected. It does most of the work for you.
Yeah. The volume 2 are the ones where we don't use AI at all. So these sections are usually subcontractors, relation to prior work. Sometimes there's facilities depending on the BA structure of what's requested at that time. Those tend to be pretty specific to your company, and they tend to only just be a couple of sentences. It's not something that is really high burden to write. So those are not areas that we have using AI. If anyone else uses AI in any of those sections and has interesting ways that they've applied it to make the proposal easier, I'm all for it. To me, those are also usually sections you only have to draft once, and then you can boilerplate use them across your SIBR. So that actually closes out the volume 2. That kind of hits the end of where we are able to use AI. So the volume 3 is your cost volume, which is an Excel sheet and is usually very specific to how your company estimates labor and how your company prices labor and how your company handles profit. So we do have a cost volume builder that makes the process of building it faster, but it is not an area where we use AI currently in our proposal writing or in our contract development.
Volume 4 is training documents, which you can't use AI to do. You must do those yourself. And then volume 5 is where all of the other documents live. This section varies proposal to proposal. We don't have like a blanket set of what goes in here. The one document that sometimes goes into volume 5 if you're doing a direct to phase 2 is a phase 1 type feasibility study. And a lot of people forget about this and then realize, oh, there's a 20-page document that I need to throw into volume 5. You absolutely can use AI to help you write that as well. And it's very similar to your related work in that you would upload or select the documents that you want to reference in your feasibility study that are property of your company, and then just follow the prompts from the BAA. It will tell you what needs to be in that study, like things like, describe the project, the period of performance. If there were any government contacts to include, you probably have to put those in manually, but most of the instructions will be covered in the BAA, and you can just turn those into a prompt. And providing you have the reference documents already, it should be pretty fast. If you don't, there probably is a one-time effort to build out your first feasibility study so that for subsequent proposals, your AI of choice has something to reference. And
And
then don't
like
forget
we've
to go
mentioned
back
with
and
the
do
work,
volume one.
give your draft and the evaluation criteria to your AI of choice and have it grade you. That is also a really great way for it's almost a way to get a cold eyes review on something that you've looked at and read and thought about so many times that it's hard to get a clear perspective on whether or not you're clearly meeting the rubric criteria.
I think with that, that is the extent of how we can use or you can use AI to help you craft a proposal. If you're interested in learning more about how to put together a cost volume, be sure to check out this episode right here and the links below and let us know if there's anything we can go over in more detail. And don't forget to check out the prompt documents as well. We'll include those. And we'll see you next time.